Wonderful. In that case, then welcome everyone to the open semifinals of KDO 2024. Well done on making it this far in the tournament. What an amazing feat, because this is indeed very competitive. So I'd like to share that congratulations first and foremost. My name is Upi. I'll be your chair judge for the round. May I please invite the other judges to introduce themselves to the room really quickly?
Hey, hello, my name is Haruka, and I'll be paneling this round. Hi, my name is Yuki Yoshida. I'll also be.
Very much. Thank you very much. Since this is a three-person panel, please do address us as a collective. So panel or members of the house would be fantastic. And if speakers have introductions they would like to share with the room, preferred gender pronoun or anything like that, not mandatory, of course, you may share so in the beginning part of your speech before you start. Other things are, as usual, speeches are 7 minutes. Don't see that by much. Replies are 4, and POIs are really highly encouraged. And we will hopefully have a great semifinals round. This is recording just for everyone's cognizance. I'm sure the ORCOM has asked your consent when it comes to that as well. So I think that'll be it for housekeeping. Unless there are any further questions, I'd like to wish everybody the very best of luck, and may this be a great semifinal round. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Prime Minister now to speak and open the semifinals debate. Here.
Can I be heard?
Yep.
Hey. Two arguments in this speech. First, this policy can incentivize people to use money, increase inflow to the market, and stimulate the economy. But secondly, I'll talk about how the wage is going to be likely to be raised on our side of the house, and why is that beneficial to the people on the ground and the situation of inflation. But before that, 2 points of clarification regarding this motion. First, we are going to decide depreciation rate based on which is equal to the annual inflation rate to the 2%. This is simply just a number, but this is a standard inflation rate in which each government around the world are setting right now. But secondarily, monetary policies on our side of the house will not be limited, but still exist, will be limited, but still exist on our side of the house. We can change or modify the amount of the money that is supplied to the market, and that is a sort of monetary policy on the government side of the house to happen, and that is a role in which the central banks do on our side of the house. So first argument, incentivization to the people to use money and stimulation of economy. Let's talk about why people use money in the first place, right? This is simple logic, right? Like when you own your money in your pocket, like that money, the value of that money is going to be decreased because we simply depreciate it. That means that the people have more incentive to use that money right now, not in the future, because the amount of the value that they can gain from usage of that money is the highest at this particular moment. This includes investment towards the stock or the debt, which company tries to have in order to gain money, or they can consume more amount of goods, more numbers of services, for example, because they simply have that incentive. Why is that beneficial for the stimulating economy to begin with? In terms of the investment that is happening, that's happening in capital markets, that money flows into the company is going to be used for the sake of the company's development or the growth of that company. For example, the company might invest that money into the facility, for example, in order to improve efficiency, or they can create some new factory which can leverages their ability to provide services, but also they can have that money into the education or the training towards their employee in order to provide better services or the better goods towards the consumer basis. In conclusion, I guess the revenue of this company is going to be higher on our side of the house for the simple reason that the people can use more amount of money and company can provide better services and goods. That is a moment where the revenue of the company is going to be higher on our side of the house. What happens then is that the amount of the money that company can use is going to be higher, which means that the tax revenue of each government is going to be right, and also the dividend that each shareholders can gain from that company is right. But the most important impact that we have is that the wage towards each employees is going to be higher, because this company are going to be pressurized to have wage base up in order to base up, simply because they have more amounts of revenue on our side of the house. Second argument, why the raising wage is going to be likely to happen on our side of the house, and why is that effectively beneficial in inflation situation? Constantly, basically the wage needs to be raised up under simple economic theory, right? That's how economics works. But the problem we identify in the status quo is that the wage, rate of the wage raising is not really doesn't match to the inflation rate to begin with. Why is this likely to happen? Well, it is simply how people use money and how the needs to a certain goods defines inflation rate. But both of them are not really predictable, or both of them are uncertain to begin with. And under the policy, after taking this proposal, I just see how people need the needs towards a certain good, or how people use money is going to be predictable more in compared to the opposition side of the house. That is the moment where the company can project what kind of wage plan they need to take, what kind of strategy to take on our side of the house. Go.
If the rise of inflation rate does not lead to the wage increases, how does your paradigm increase the wage as well?
First of all, we told you and gave you the mechanism as to why companies have capacity to do so. But secondly, why companies have incentive to do so, because the employees or the shareholder can pressurize them simply because they have more amounts of their revenue on our side of the house. So what is the problem? What's the problem on the opposition side of the house? Given that the wage raising rate doesn't match to the inflation rate, which means that the massive numbers of people are now suffering right now from lack of money. Simply, right? Like rent fee for housing, or the food, electricity, which is necessary to provide safer condition for you, is somehow very, very difficult for you to have. Just see the example in the United States. Massive numbers of people can't afford to the housing, can't afford to the electricity. That is horrible situation. That is going to be solved on our side of the house, because the wage is going to be likely to be raised on our side of the house more, corresponding to inflation rate on our side of the house. Okay, third issue, the impacts of this is that we have massive, we can save massive numbers of people, or the lives of the massive numbers of people on our side of the house. This is the exclusive benefit to by taking this proposal. The burden of proof that the opposition side of the house is that how the company or the governments even can raise their wage and save, help up the people from the high inflation rate that is happening right now. We have that on our side of the house. Let's talk about preemption, right? They might say, hey, in terms of economic crisis, government cannot control that situation and manage that situation. We have simply one responses. In terms of the reason why the crisis happened, it's because monetary supply and economical needs doesn't match. That is the simple reason, right? And economical needs, it's going to be predictable because we have this depreciation rate and people have more incentive to use that. That is a moment where the uncertain possibility is going to be decreased on our side of the house. That means, okay, even if you assume that it is more difficult on our side of the house to tackle down the economic crisis, but the total amount of the economic crisis that would be likely to happen is going to be decreased. So that's not a big issue. Proud to propose this motion.
Okay, thank you very much, Prime Minister, for those very fine remarks. To start the case in the opposition side of the House, I'd like to invite the Honorable Leader of Opposition to speak. Here.
Hey, am I audible?
Yes, clearly.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Creating a desirable asset desirable formal asset is very important for general public, and especially me, retiring in the university for 1 year, right? Okay, so it's important for people have more free choices, regardless of whatever the government does, on how to allocate our property and create kind of wealth is very important choice. That's why we oppose. Before explaining the important right argument, then let me engage with the leader of opposition, Prime Minister's speech. Okay, the one thing, the impact is that, well, this kind of policy will lead to the increase of wages the company employs. One, like I said in point of information, they say that the inflation rate does not lead to the increase of wages. So it's up to the company's choices, right? And two, even though they say that wealth of the company will increase, money of company will increase, but company can also have a choice to use money for other investment, like buying real estate or some other forms. Why can you guarantee that the employees' wage will increase by their proposal? Thirdly, there's an alternative, and the factor that they will lead to the result of increasing wages actually government policy or actually the effort of labor unions. For example, in the United States last year, that the auto industry decided to raise the wage because of the large effort by UAW, United Automakers kind of labor union, and also Biden supported this kind of argument, right? So as a result, this is not just because of kind of the value of yen and value of money and other kind of thing, but this is effort by the labor union workers and also the government. So this is not unique. Okay, now let me move on to our argument. Now, it is important for the people to have a choice of how to create their own wealth. And this government proposal will work against it. So I have a hobby of playing Japanese chess. And recently I enjoy buying Japanese chess pieces. Sometimes some are very expensive, more than 1 million yen. It's my choice to decide whether I buy this thing or when I buy this thing. Well, it's up to when I can afford it. So it's important for me to make myself happy by choosing when and what I would like to buy. The governmental proposal will deprive that kind of important choices. Okay, and okay, no, not yet. Yeah, important choices. Okay, in the status quo, so some people have anxiety about the future, like after getting old and retiring from the company, and also when they have children, they need to make money to prepare for their children's education fee when they go to high school, they go to university, so on and so forth. So they have a very much huge concern about keeping the money, and they also have a anxiety. Sometimes they may lose job because of economic situation, or they may lose job because they become sick or they get injured or something like that. And huge medical costs will be spent when they become hospitalized. Government side may say that, well, our insurance covers. Well, it's just partial. Like if they got hospitalized like for 1 month, still it's a huge amount of money, right? So because people have that kind of anxiety, so these people want to save money in the bank, or they may choose to have some investment, like a trust investment. NISA is really popular in these days. They may buy gold, right? So it's up to the people. It's up to the people whether they use money, they spend money, or they allocate money for certain kind of wealth and decide when I would spend the money or I save the money for the future. The government proposal deprive this kind of wealth. Okay, like I said, they will escalate a kind of depreciate the value of yen, value of money in all of the country. This will encourage people to spend more money, right? So, but this is not the people's choice, right? If you know that value of money is going down, you feel that, well, keeping the money, I'm losing my wealth. So I spend money, but I have to buy things, right? Even though I don't want to, right? This is not the choice, right? And also, so this is taking away the important kind of choice, right? So they may lose money for the future, and they may when they need money, then they don't have money to go to the hospital because they don't have sufficient money. When they become sick, they stay home and not spending so money and so forth. Some people have anxiety for this kind of thing. So after this, the counterfactual that people will have to have this kind of concern all the time. Do I have money when I become 30 years old, 45, 40 years old, or even 70 years old? So that kind of concern will continue and accumulate. This is a very terrible situation, right? And also, so impact, this is the impact. And especially this may concern with the people who have who do not have who are not wealthy kind of classes, right? They spend money, but they cannot afford to. Okay, I'll take you.
You claim that it is individual choices to use money when and how. But the thing is that inflation rate, given the inflation rate is higher and you can't afford to anything, how is that choice is guaranteed on your side of the house?
Okay. Probably the choice is not 100% free, but your proposal will rather, make the situation worse, right? People have still, okay, we have inflation rate, but there are certain kind of financial products that people spend some money, but this inflation rate might change, but the government proposal unique in that this kind of depreciation of the money will going down for the future, next month, next year, forever, this kind of thing. The trust of the monetary value of the money will be lost, and which is very worse than the status quo. So that's why the pressure or psychological impact to the people will keep continuing, and also people will be forced to use it forever, even though you have only money for eating food or something unnecessary things, then you keep spending with this kind of anxiety forever. That's the uniqueness, and that's why we oppose. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much indeed for those very fine remarks. To continue proposition this afternoon, I'd like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister to speak. Here.
May I be heard?
Yes.
Okay. The world of opposition is absolutely not a world with constant static value of currency. For example, many OECD countries target 2% inflation rate in the status quo. Many developing countries have way higher realistic inflation rates in the status quo. Our claim is that it is much better to have a constant and expectable rate of currency inflation insofar as individuals are more aware of that inflation rate intuitively on the other side of the house, and it increases the pool of money, which eventually leads to successful economic growth, and it decreases future volatility, creating less cause of risk in the long term. Responses. Firstly, their claim is that this is not a free choice. First, an intuitive response to this is that, yes, you do have choice because you can still keep on to your money. No one is forcing you to do anything. Secondly, that claim is completely symmetric on either side of the house. Insofar as inflation exists on their side of the house as well, it is just unpredictable. Thirdly, I want to flip this claim because in the status quo, people do not actually understand inflation. They don't recognize that in reality, for the reason that the numerical value of currency is constant. That means people are unaware of the future risks of holding on to that money and thereby do not choose irrationally to keep their money, even though that the value of that money is decreasing in the long term. On the other side of the house, people have realistic and intuitive understanding of what inflation is because it is well reflected in numerical value of that currency, thereby increasing risks because they can make better decisions. Secondly, they cast doubt on our claim about why we get wage rise for two reasons. Firstly, obviously, we look at corporations. I think, firstly, corporations have greater capacity to do so because they're likely to be able to grow and raise their sales value on the other side of the house, insofar as they have access to, firstly, greater scale of investment that allows them to invest in facilities that accelerate the efficiency of production, but also people have way higher demand in the market insofar as they have more incentive to use money in the now and in the present. That means that corporations obviously have the capacity to increase wage on the other side of the house, whereas on their side of the house, there is no growth of corporation, or at least to a comparatively lesser degree. But secondly, there's a greater incentive for workers to change the situation. Their assertion is that workers can do it in the status quo. But the problem is that obviously corporations are highly risk averse because they cannot predict what the inflation rate in the future looks like. Once corporations raise wages, it's difficult for them to backtrack on that decision because that creates a lot of grievances within workers. Note that this same situation applies to the government. Government oftentimes fixes minimum wage in the status quo for the same reason that corporations are risk averse. And the other side of the house, obviously workers are numerically, intuitively aware that their wage value is decreasing day by day. Thereby, they have a huge intuitive incentive to engage in strikes, hard actions, to force the corporations to change, to force the government to implement regulation such that their minimum wage is pegged to the inflation rate, which is now predictable, by the way, so corporations don't fear that risk. That is the reason why corporations obviously had an incentive to raise wages on the outside of the house, which is a great impact in this debate. First argument on individual security. Opposition's nuance, not an argument in this case, is that some people do not save money, and that is a potential risk because, for example, retirement, what do you do when you lose your money? Firstly, saving money is a risk in the status quo for the reason that you have a lot of volatility. Inflation rate is absolutely high. For example, in developing countries, that is much better for individuals. So it is not clear why saving money is a sufficiently effective way of managing that risk in the first place. Secondly, investment, which is our alternative in most instances. For example, pension funds that are subsidized or that are advertised by and promoted by the government, like iDeCo, which exists in Japan, is not a risky investment in majority of instances. For example, it looks at index rather than individual company. For example, all country index, for example, SP 500, it is largely stable in those instances. And of course, you can withdraw your money at any time. But also recognize that once people have less savings, which is their best case, there's increased pressure on the government to implement, for example, better welfare policies, better capacity to save people when they are struggling on the ground. So we think our comparative is much more safer, unstable, and more expectable on their side of the house. But finally, let's engage in some weighing. Because I think I'm quite right, considering that the leader of opposition is a university professor, he can save money, and that's good for him. But the problem is that those are obviously not the most vulnerable individuals in society. Obviously, they have access to well-paid jobs. They have access to stable employment. They have access to welfare, investment, credit, all of that stuff. So even in the worst case where these people fail, they're not going to fail entirely, which is why this is not a great impact in this debate. Comparatively, look at people that are struggling day by day because they live paycheck to paycheck and do not have sufficient amount of money by way of minimum wage, because minimum wage is absolutely kept artificially low. These are people that do not have the capacity to live on a daily basis, which is why we think these are far more vulnerable population, which we must prioritize in this debate. By the way, crises do not happen on a regular basis. Wages influence people on a regular basis, on a day-to-day basis. That is why our impact is far more constant as well. The same applies to our claims about employment. So I think these impacts are far more important compared to what the opposition side stand behind in this debate. Yes.
Farmers seem to increase the demand for even food, which is important to poor people. Don't you think that would raise the price of food?
So our claim is that is okay for the reason that you get better wages in the first instance, but also, like, if you don't have demand and you keep it artificially low under your side of the house, like, it has problems for corporate management, and obviously in the long term, it is far worse for the market entirely. Lastly, an argument on crisis management. So this is a potential argument from opposition side that we cannot manage crisis well. Firstly, it is unclear whether they can manage crisis well in the first instance. So I think, realistically speaking, they need to explain why Japan, which has been failing for the last 30 years, would be able to implement that under their side of the house. But secondly, our claim is that we reduce the cause of crises for multiple reasons. Firstly, we reduce the volatility of currency, which is one of few risks that exist in the economic market, thereby reducing the overall risk in the economy. In fact, in many instances, the expectability and the predictability of currency reduces the risks because it counterbalances of volatility that exists outside of currency. But secondly, it reduces heated and concentrated investment in instances where people are panicking in the status quo. People have access to huge amount of money because they have an incentive to save up under their themselves. The problem is that that flows into the market at one point in time, and then it leads to a hyperinflation, for example, in the worst case scenario. On the outside of the house, that does not happen because there's constancy in demand, constancy in consumption activities, which means the heated and in many instances, overheated investment and consumption activities do not take place on the outside of the house. Obviously, even if they're successfully proving that they get to solve crisis better, which is obviously unclear and unrealistic as well. Our better claim is that we prevent crises from happening in the first instance, and crises obviously influence millions and billions of people all around the world, which is clearly a huge impact in the debate. For all of those reasons, we win.
Okay, dokes. Thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister, for those very fine remarks. To continue the case in the opposition side of the House, now I'd like to invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition to speak. Here.
Am I audible?
Yep.
Okay, my gender pronouns is he or him. When you have POI, please verbalize your POI standing, and then when you have POI, come here and speak to this PC. The speech gonna start in 3, 2, 1. People are not the tool for the economic booster for society. They have rights to have risk hedge by saving money for unexpected issue. Or they have rights to live a stable life by preserving the value of the currency, right? But today's government side tried to victimize these kind of unnegotiable rights at the expense of very unsure and speculative economic benefit. This is why our side have a clear win in this debate. We have two things to talk about. First of all, about the rebuttal, especially engaging with the premise of the trickle-down theory the government side tried to say. And second of all, I'd like to talk about the choice of people, especially about the poor people. These kind of people, the vulnerable people, will be exploited on their side. And this is why we won the debate. Okay, first of all, about the rebuttal to the premise of the trickle-down theory. So their theory is really, and the argument is really clear, right? Because their premise is that the revenue of the people, especially the employees, will increase because we have a trickle down, because the company can be really lucrative because we have the economic booster by taking this proposal. But we think it is not true. First of all, we think that the top people, for example, the president of the corporation or the executive of the corporation, have incentive to exploit the employees, right? Because first of all, they want to preserve the value of money, right? Even the rich people want to save their money and increase their salary, right? That means that they do not want to spend money for the employees. Rather, they want to save money for their salary, right? So they have the incentive to exploit the employees from the beginning. And second of all, they have the they have the incentive to make the company more lucrative, right? For example, so this is why if they have the lots of benefit as a company, of course they have incentive to put money for example, the equipment of the corporation, or to have the new market, or to have a new product or like that. So they have less incentive to spend money for the salary of employees. This is why, for example, in Japan tried to prioritize the corporation right by benefiting this kind of corporation by saying that that maybe there will be a trickle down salary, but there's no increase or few increase of the revenue of the employees, right? This kind of situation is actually happening in many of the world. So within trickle down theory, it's actually not true. And they said the response from their side will be the employers will have a pressure, or the stockholders have the pressure to increase their revenue. But we think it is not true, right? Of course, the logic here is that they have a predictable decrease on money. This is why that will employees will pressure them to increase their revenue. But even under SS pool, they are in the severe situation. Their working condition can be really bad, or they can be fired in some occasion, or their income is decreasing and decreasing, and it is predictable that they can have a miserable life. But they do not have the incentive to negotiate with them, right? And they are just becoming desperate, right? This is why this kind of some strike or this kind of negotiation is not happening. Is really rarely happening, right? So this is because they are really busy, because they can be really poor, and they want to increase their job, and they understand that there is a power balance because there's a gap between the top and the bottom. This is why they feel like they cannot do anything and they are really negative and they cannot have this kind of strong negotiation. So we think the result of this is that there's no trickle-down theory and the lucrative people, the company exists under their logic, but of course the top people will be lucrative and can have money, but there's the increasing gap of the poor people and the rich people, right? This is the result of their side. So here's a comparison. They're talking about really, really speculative benefit. But as my partner told you, we have the tangible harm by taking the proposal. We will lose the right to save their money, and we will lose the right to keep their life stable, right? There are many unexpected issues, for example, injury, or they have to go to injury or unexpected disease, or they have to buy something really expensive. For example, if they suddenly have a child, of course they need to buy something, right? But we think that for this kind of unexpected issue, we should have the certain right to preserve their currency, right? But they all deprive this kind of thing for this kind of very speculative benefit of economy. So we think that we cannot be tolerant on that. Okay, this is a rebuttal to the previous speaker and to the entire government. I'd like to move on to my substantive, but before that, yes.
There are numbers of insurance that exist to protect your future risk from yourself. How that's going to be dismissed on our side?
Even with the insurance system, they can have an unexpected disease. For example, some of the cancer, for some of the cancer, the insurance system cannot be applied, or they may have some for example, they sometimes are fired, right? And they will lose job in some occasion, but there's no insurance for that in some occasion, right? Or in the United States, there is few in the insurance system that is kept for the medical fees, right? So we think there are many situations that the insurance, such kind of safety net by government cannot work. We are living in the VUCA situation, so we can have a really uncertain and unexpected issue, and we have the right to secure them by themselves, right? This is why keeping money or keeping their currency can be very important. Okay, so moving on to my argument about the poor people. We think the poor people will be exploited for several reasons. First of all, they feel like it is really urgent to have this situation, right? Because at 2%, by 2%, their salary or their currency is decreasing. We think that is really urgent for poor people, and the people will have incentive to not to have a waste of the money, right? This is why they were pressured to use lots of money. And second of all, we think that they will be the poor people can be really uneducated. For example, they cannot. It is really hard for them to have the university education or high school education. That means that they are really easy to be deceived by some actor. And we think in this kind of situation, of course, some YouTuber or some kind of the investor try to deceive these kind of poor people, right? Because they feel they are really upset, and it is very easy for them to deceive them. This is why there are many fake news about what to buy as a stock or like that. This is why we think that these kind of uneducated people can be easily exploited by this kind of actor, like the professional investor like that. And third of all, of course, there are these kind of people can be really desperate, and they think that as soon as possible they want to use money, right? So they will use money for some easy to access products. For example, they will pay for the Netflix, or they will want to pay money for really for example, some online gaming or like that. So we think that on this kind of situation, they will waste money so much, right? Rich people will not do such kind of thing because they want to preserve their money by putting lots of money for example, stock or something like the art products or like that to preserve the value of this kind of material, right? But we think for poor people, it is really hard for them to do it. So we think that for poor people, they will be exploited so much by taking the proposal, and we think that is really hard situation for them. We are very proud to oppose this question.
All right, cool. Thank you very much, DLO, for those very fine remarks. And as a final substantive from Team Pro, I'd like to invite Golfweb now to speak. Here.
So the reason why many central banks across the world is set the rate of inflation is because it's crucial to control how people spend money for the future and create a stable, growing economy. What I'm really unclear is what kind of the world the opposition side wants. Like they want to protect poor, so if they want the deflation on their side, but they have never explained how counterfactual is going to look like on their side of the house. So that's why we oppose. So we propose two things in my speech. Firstly, about individual choice, then how current system current currency system is failing and why we prefer this system instead. So moving on. Firstly, about individual choices. Two things to say. Firstly, I think about how on our side of the house people will be better off. Four things to say here. Firstly, rather what we say is that you can increase money through more expected return of investment because of the fixed interest rate gives you a better investment opportunity. The reason here is that they try to say that shit of like investment opportunity, like the not good financial products are existing on their side of the house. But what we say here is that with a fixed rate of the inflation, we will be able to have more better like ETF or more better stocks, which is going to create more stable return on our side of the house because of the calculation of the arbitrage and the calculation of the price of those financial products are more easier on our side of the house. But secondly, we have better economic cycle. The reason why currently we see the increase of wages more, for example, in Japan, we have more than 5% of base salary up is exactly because inflation allows company to raise price of the products and which also allows company to have more higher sales and a higher profit on their side, which allows company to have more capacity to pay out for wages in their side, in our side of the house. So exactly this is the reason why ultimately we can also increase the individual choices by like raising the wages of the individuals. But thirdly, we think alternatives the arrow as proposed, like labor union, I don't think the labor union is going to succeed anyway without inflation, because how much you are trying to like negotiate with company, if the company doesn't have any capacity to pay out, I think that's not going to work. So on our side of the house, we can give more capacity for company to actually pay out if we also have a labor union on our side of the house. But lastly, we have difference in stability of the raised wages. We say the constant change of inflation rate, which is going to happen on their side of the house, force them to, for example, lower wages in the future to like prepare for uncertain inflation, or for example, if deflation happens, they can have an excuse to say that we have to lower wages because the price of the products are lowering, which means on their side of the house, they have to have constant negotiation about wages with companies, and they will likely to have the risk of lowering wages on their side. But on our side of the house, we have constant rate of the inflation, which is likely to allow company to decide the future wages more constantly, and we have less wages negotiation, which gives the company workers to have more stable income on our side later. So second analysis under this argument about individual choice is that how on their side of the house, choice is rather deprived. Two reasons here. Firstly, I think instability of price of products innately deprives the option for you to buy products at the base point, or initially even deprives the people's capacity to calculate your financial plan for the future in the first place. For example, if you don't know the future food price is going to be, I think there is a very difficulty for you to calculate the best option or best financial plan for you on their side of the house. But on our side, we have at least 2% inflation target, which is very fixed, which is going to allow individuals to have better calculation of the future economic plan or future financial plan when you have to invest for real estate, what amount of money you have to save for future in the first place. So that's the exact reason why we have the better like individual choice on our side. But secondary standard is that we have already explained how holding money without knowing the future rather deprives your money in terms of the cost opportunity of the investment in the first place. On their side of the house, you don't know how much money you actually, don't care, or you actually don't know how much of your money is actually depreciating because the amount of like facial value on the money is fixed, as our DPM has explained, which means on their side of the house, they are just saving money without knowing anything. And that's actually depriving the you to have a better like asset allocation or have a wealthier wealth. That's going to be actually deprives option on their side of the house. Before moving on to the second argument, yes.
Okay, you said the price increase of the food, other things, okay, as long as wage increases. How about the people who live on pension or limited kind of income?
So my question here is that if you want to like save poor people, do you want to have inflation on their side, or actual status quo is the people are or central banks are trying to have a like inflation rate target, which is just unstable on their side. So we didn't know how much of the poor people is going to be saved on their side. So I think you should have explained that. So moving on to the second argument, about how current currency system is actually failing. Like if we simplify the economy, like the rate of inflation is decided by economic side and monetary side. Why our side is better? Three things here. firstly, I think on the other side, people randomly invest money or like not invest money because they have huge uncertainty on inflation of things or your wages or profit of the company, as we have explained, which in and of itself unstabilize the economy itself because you are randomly like you just don't know the future like inflation, which means you just have to speculate the future inflation rate, like as the many securities company are just speculating, right? Which means you don't have a like better plan for like using services or like spending money on goods. But secondly, more than that, I think central banks are currently having difficulty with controlling interest rates or the inflation rate in the first place because they have only an indirect way of like controlling it in the first place through, for example, like buying and selling the treasury bonds or things like that, or like controlling monetary supply policy. So on their side of the house, they only have an indirect way of controlling the inflation rate, which in and of itself didn't allow, for example, Japan to like actually achieve the target 2% inflation rate, or in and of itself is likely to also create a future instability of the economy on their side of the house. But third of all, rather what we say is that this indirect, also thirdly, we think that highly unexpected inflow of monetary money spent on the goods, or for example, money, or like for example, the investment on real estate or investment on like, for example, expansion of the industry or expansion of the factory in and of itself is going to be not beneficial for the company, right? Because you will not be able to have like better like future plan for the company to grow, or like you have to change the expansion of the plan at some point of the time because the inflation rate has changes and the cost of the expansion or cost of the investment has changed on their side of the house, which is actually enables company to have a better economic cycle to pay out for the wages. So that's why we propose.
Okay, thank you very much, Govwip, for those very fine remarks. And to conclude the substantive part of the debate, Opwip now, please. Here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm opposition whip. My gender pronouns is he, him. If I have a paper close to me, I'm going to start my speech within 3, 2, 1. Opposition with two issues in my speech. First, let me deal with the main issue coming from the government, which is about economic circulation. Second, let's talk about for the individual, which is better. So first, economic circulation. They talked about how on their side of this house, we can stimulate the economy, but we don't believe so. Why? Because the concerning for what people likely to use money, as my partner clearly clarified. Because A, in terms of the rich people, or for example, middle class people, they want to exchange money to unchangeable variable things in order to preserve their own property. Because even after they get to the, for example, commodity, they have a strong big room to use money. For example, they try to buy a famous picture, for example, land estate, etc. Point is here, those kind of things compared with non-internet currency, that is better because those kind of value tend to be preserved. But point is here, even though they buy the, for example, famous picture or land estate, it does not make new production, new employment, new factory. It does not lead the economic circulation at all. But secondly, in terms of the poor people, they use most of the money to buy the commodity to begin with. Then how to use the rest of money of their own income is that, for example, they started to buy the commodity for the near future, such as, for example, toilet paper or, for example, frozen food, etc. But there is an upper limit because the capacity of your, for example, home or refrigerator is always limited. The question is, But even but for the poor people, they difficult to access, for example, land or famous picture because those kind of price, no thank you, are likely to be higher, much more, as my partner told you. In this occasion, they rather have to use very, for example, spot entertainment, like the money, for example, online game, for example, just to enter the subscription. In this occasion, it does not stimulate economy because it just, for example, increase some just server or just for some engineering. In this occasion, how on their side, these are drastically those kind of economic circulation likely to happen. But secondly, more importantly, even if we take some best case scenario, some companies' revenue increase, we think that total tax revenue or total GDP, etc., does not necessarily become bigger on their side with this house. Why? Because as I clarify, maybe on their side with this house, some companies can get more profit, but at the same time, rather some companies lose the profit, etc. Why? In the case of, for example, venture company, which might be beneficial in the future, or temporarily fall into crisis with a bank crisis, those kind of, for example, middle company or small company exist. Those companies are currently supported by bank, and the bank's budget are stored money by the individual citizens, right? In this occasion, in the counterfactual, it is difficult for these companies to manage because it is difficult for those kind of companies to get the money from the bank itself. Because on their side, this as people try to use up the money. In this occasion, how people have the incentive to store money to the bank to be used. Therefore, in this occasion, those kind of companies have to face less profit and face bankrupt. In this occasion, total, for example, GDP of all companies' profit or tax revenue itself is not so changeable, even status quo and counterfactual. Therefore, we think any kind of the merit on their side with this does not stand in this debate. Having shown that, then as for individual, which side is better? So first, their main case about individual is that wage will increase because value of money is consistently go down in the counterfactual, and it is predictable. Therefore, individual worker try to do strike and pressurize the workers, etc. Really battle. It's not true simply because there is always power imbalance between employer and worker. This is not an exclusive point with their side and our side. Because when those kind of workers are strongly obstacle of the management of the company, those kind of people are likely to be, for example, marginalized inside of the company, less promotion, in worst case, they are fired. And workers have to fear those kind of situations. Therefore, strike less likely to happen. But secondly, more importantly, even if it is true, still, as for the companies, it is difficult to raise the wage so simply. Why? Because even if, for example, we can predict how the currency constantly go down. At the same time, for example, how much, for example, consumer react to your company, or how much effort workers can do, or how much profit companies can get is unpredictable still, right? In this occasion, how those kind of only one predictable thing can suddenly lead the good promotion of, for example, change the incentive for the company, and the company can do that, we could not understand. But thirdly, more important, even if all of their argument is true, still it's not exclusion. Why? Because on our side of this, maybe I agree, inflation rate is unpredictable. Therefore, rather workers have the motivation to preserve their own property because those kind of future is unpredictable. For example, in terms of the NISA, or for example, foreign stock, or for example, foreign currency. In order to buy those kind of things, rather workers have the incentive to get much more income from the company. Therefore, same logic can apply even on our side of this. Therefore, in terms of the wage argument, their side does not have any exclusivity at all. But having shown that, compared with that, we say maximizing the choice on the counter status quo is much more important. Because as the DPM agreed, this society is facing the age of the book. Therefore, how to preserve your property in several ways is very important because by dividing the risk, you have the more possibility to preserve your own money. What we have to recognize here is that status quo, we agree there is no 100% safe, but compared with their side of this house, because in their counterfactual, clearly 100% your property and money have to go down. Comparatively, as far as we have certain money, at least there are certain possibility your property itself can be kept in this occasion. For example, you can buy, for example, dollar or yen or euro. By dividing those kind of risk, you can please a lot of chances to preserve. On their side, which is necessarily those kind of properties, those kind of value of your own property have to go down as far as you have it as money. Especially when the economic crisis happen, how much amount of money you have is extremely important because in this occasion, state support is not enough. Vulnerable people and most, out of time, I think. Most people have to face very severe situation. Prime Minister talked about how only cause of economic crisis is that demand and supply of money mismatches. No, we don't believe so. For example, bubble economy in Japan, for example, Lehman shock caused by, for example, inflation of the land value, it's trigger, right? In this occasion, how on their side of this, there is no possibility to for those kind of economic crisis happen. Therefore, point is in both paradigm, those kind of economic crisis can happen, but in both in which paradigm is better in order to protect the individual property? We think compared with their side, with our side, have at least a better possibility and chance. This is for in order to protect those kind of very vulnerable people. We oppose. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, speaker, for those very fine remarks. And that's the end of the substantive part of the debate. Proceeding with the reply part, as usual, we're going to have opposition reply first. Here.
Two things as reply speaker. First of all, I like to deal with the economic benefit. It's really speculative argument from their side. And second of all, I like to compare with our side benefit or our side harm about the choice of people, especially the poor people. I like to explain one by one. So first of all, about their economic benefit. So their logic is like, by making the predictable and consistent decrease on the currency value, they can have the people will stimulate the economy and they can deal with that kind of situation more cleverly, right? But we have two kind of doubt, right? First of all, we think that people are not so clever, right? Because this is why people sometimes understand they have a consistent decrease of the currency or the salary, but they are refraining from the negotiation, for example, the strikes or some demonstration on the street or like that. Why is that? We clearly explain the motivation of these and the poor people because they internalize the value that there is a power imbalance between the top people and the bottom people, and because they feel like they cannot fight for that kind of thing. Because the top people try to excuse them by saying some complicated things, right? So we think that because people are not so clever and cannot have a best decision when they are in severe situation, we think this kind of situation is not occurring under status quo, and making the predictable thing cannot change these kind of thing anything, right? They haven't explained anything at all. And second of all, we think that there are many unpredictable things, even in the government side paradigm, right? As my partner told you. Of course, we have the predictable thing on the decrease on the currency, but we are not sure whether or not the revenue of the employees increase, or to what extent that will increase, or like that. About the stock market, we cannot be sure about how much money they can get or like that. So we think as long as we are living in the VUCA society, we think there are many unexpected issues in the economy. This is why we cannot stimulate and predict many other kind of things. So we think on the government side, there are many unpredictable things and people are not clear about that. This is why we think this kind of trickle-down theory or stimulation of this kind of economy will not occur. And third of all, even if that is true from the government side, we think there's no exclusivity, as my partner told you, right? Because we have lots of other ways to increase the revenue, as my partner told you, right? So we think there's no exclusivity from their side, and they have a tangible harm that we will decrease the value of the currency, right? So we think that there's no their economic benefit is really, really speculative. Compared to that, our side has more tangible benefit and harm, right? Because there are, of course, because on the opposition side paradigm, there are really unexpected, unexpected decrease of this kind of currency value, right? On this situation, people can rationally have a choice to preserve their money. For example, in the urgent situation, the poor people try to save their money and preserve the value of currency because they are poor and they have to be like deal with some unexpected thing like disease or some accident or their fire from the company or like that. But on this kind of occasion, they have no right or less right to do that because we have an art. We will try to make them upset by having the decrease in the currency and try to make them desperate on use of the money, right? This is why poor people will try to waste their money, especially the poor people will do that, right? We mechanize this kind of point and we explain why that can end up is the waste of the money, right? There's no engagement from the government side. So we think on this kind of occasion, we just deprive the choice of people by making this kind of urgent situation, especially of poor people, and that can lead to the exploitation of poor people by the rich people, and only rich people can have a benefit by taking the proposal. This is why, at the expense of the very speculative argument from their side, we cannot be tolerated to lose this kind of choice for people. We are very proud to oppose this motion.
All right. Thank you very much, speaker, for those very final remarks. And finally, to close the debate, proper reply. Here.
Can I be heard?
Mhm.
Okay. Inflation is symmetric on either side. What is asymmetric is that currencies are unpredictable on the side of opposition. Under our world, it is constant and predictable. That's the difference in inflation that exists on both sides. So what this means is that all arguments coming from the opposition side on why inflation is bad is a nonsense in this debate. For example, the argument in relation to choice. For example, the argument in relation to people who live on fixed wages. Those are people that are likely impacted on their side of the house as well. It is much better than that those things are predictable on the our side of the house. There are a couple of important arguments that they never engage with, and not engaging with arguments does not delete arguments from debates. Firstly, our argument on reduction in prices, which we argued is a great impact. Secondly, our argument on increased investment, especially to high volatility context, for example, the developing world, which we thought was where greatest impacts arise in this debate. Those arguments completely go unchallenged in this debate, and that is a failure of this opposition side. Firstly, which side maximizes choices of individuals? Firstly, their argument is that people are pressurized to use money. Our argument, firstly, is that people are pressurized to save money. So I would argue that argument is completely symmetric on either side of the house. But we also argue that it is worse on their side of the house because the value of money decreases. So the amount of choice realized in the future is obviously limited compared to what you can do in the present. So our argument is that we expand the amount of choice realized in the R side. Secondly, obviously, we made the claim that choice is based on the amount of correct information you have. They don't have that insofar as people are not intuitively aware of existing inflation, with which we flipped on the R side of the house. So in terms of choice, we obviously maximize that on the R side of the house. This is a win for the government side. Secondly, on wage increase and risk management. Their claim is that rich people want to save money, and that's why workers will not get wages. Their first claim here is that workers are replaceable coming from WIP, but obviously as a collective body, workers are not replaceable. That is an absurd argument that misrepresents our case. But firstly, I would argue that there are a couple of reasons as to why we get far greater chance of, wage fixation on the other side of the house, wage adjustment on the other side of the house. Firstly, we have greater incentive of workers on the other side of the house insofar as they are intuitively aware of the necessity of adjustment of wages. We also told you that it is far easier to convince corporations insofar as they have more room available to expand wages to workers. Secondly, we would assume but not concede that some workers' strikes, for example, fail in the end. That is fine, but the problem is that is symmetric. But also, in some instances, it succeeds. But the reason why we are better is that when it succeeds, the result of that negotiation is fixated all the way into the future because the likely negotiation that takes place is fixation, which is pegged to the inflation rate, which is now fixated on the other side of the house. Under their world, you need to negotiate on a yearly basis, and you might succeed in some instances, but that success never turns into long-term impact. That is why our argument was far better in terms of this. We already noted to you that this is a greater impact compared to risk management, people spending money on stupid products. for the reason that this applies constantly and it applies to a greater, more vulnerable groups of people in society. By the way, they don't engage with the expansion of employment argument, which has nothing to do with wage increase, and that is also an argument they don't engage with. Their only response to this is that, poor people waste money, but it's not clear why gaming is going to be a realistic option for poor people, especially when they have now access to greater information as well as greater product or greater availability of information in society. They say people will diversify portfolio, that's why it's fine. But it's not clear why people won't be deceived under their side of the house, which is the claim that they make under their world. Lastly, on economic growth. Obviously, not everything big is speculative, and they can't just say speculative and dismiss all the arguments that are well mechanized. Their only response is that, rich people buy artwork, but like a lot of other people buy real estate, which has returns to the economy. Then they claim poor people have limited growth, contribute to limited growth because they only buy commodity. What they miss is the middle ground. The middle class people are the majority of individuals in society. They contribute to investment. They contribute to the buying of many, many products, including subscription, by the way, which has multiplier effect in the economy in the same way, other products that are real and tangible have. That is the reason why we clearly win this debate.